There's a number that haunts the conversation about black love, family, and future. 25%. 1 in 4. It surfaces in barbershop debates, in heated social media threads, and in quiet, worried conversations between friends. The statistic, in its simplest form, says that roughly 1 in 4 black men who get married are marrying a woman who isn't black. For some, this number is a triumphant chord, a sign of a world moving beyond racial boundaries, a testament to personal freedom and progress. For others, it's a funeral bell, tolling for a deep and painful problem that threatens the very foundation of the black family. It's a statistic that has become a symbol, a single number loaded with generations of hope, fear, pride, and resentment. It's less a piece of data and more like a cultural Rorschach test. What you see in it says as much about you as it does about the world. That 25% figure, though it gets all the headlines, is just the tip of a colossal iceberg. The full story is vastly more complex, rooted in a 2015 study of newlyweds, a specific snapshot in time whose figures have already shifted. But the undercurrent it revealed, the undeniable trend of black men marrying outside their race at a significantly higher rate than black women, represents one of the most profound shifts in black relationships in a century. This isn't just a statistic. It lives and breathes in our families, our friend groups, and our social media feeds, sparking endless, looping debates and a universe of heartfelt confusion. It is the ghost and the machine of modern black romance. So, what is really happening beneath the surface of this one number? Why are black men marrying non-black women at more than double the rate of black women? Is this simply the organic outcome of millions of individual preferences? Is it the predictable result of a lopsided, mathematically brutal dating market? Is it a marker of ultimate success in a society that still prizes assimilation? Or is it a symptom of cultural abandonment, a quiet exodus from community? The conversation is often a cacophony of loud opinions and hot takes, but it is desperately short on foundational facts and nuanced understanding. Let's turn down the volume on the noise and turn up the resolution on the facts. We're going to move past the anger and the assumptions. We're going to meticulously examine the real data, the tectonic social shifts, and the intimate personal choices that are redrawing the map of black marriage in America. We're going to gather all the scattered, complex, and often contradictory pieces of this puzzle and put them together one by one to find the real reasons behind that one powerful and profoundly misunderstood number. Before we can possibly diagnose the why, we have to get a firm grip on the what. The data, when you look at it closely, paints a picture that's far more nuanced and intricate than a single start percentage could ever suggest. That famous statistic, the one that acts as the anchor for this entire discussion, originates from a landmark 2015 study by the Pew Research Center. It found that 24% of recently married black men had a spouse of a different race or ethnicity. That's the 1 in 4 figure. For a crucial comparison, that same study revealed that only 12% of newlywed black women had married a non-black spouse. This 2-to-1 gap, this dramatic difference in the marital patterns between black men and black women, is not a new phenomenon. It's a critical, defining feature of the story, and it has been remarkably consistent for decades. It is a statistical heartbeat of this trend. But it's essential to understand that this was a snapshot of newlyweds, people who had just gotten married nearly a decade ago. It's like judging the climate by the weather on a single afternoon. If we broaden our lens and look at more recent data from 2021 for all married black men, not just those who recently tied the knot, the number adjusts to about 15%. For all married black women, that number is about 7%. So, while the overall figure that's often thrown around in arguments needs that crucial context, the gap remains. The 2-to-1 ratio between men and women holds firm. The real story isn't in one number, but in the journey of that number over time. It's a story of radical change. If we rewind the clock to 1980, only 5% of all newly married black people, men and women combined, had a spouse of a different race. Since then, that rate has more than tripled, an increase overwhelmingly driven by the accelerating trend among black men. So, the data-backed trend is clear and undeniable. Black men are choosing partners outside their race at roughly double the rate of black women. But even this startling fact doesn't exist in a vacuum. To truly grasp its significance, We need to zoom out even further and look at the entire landscape of marriage in Black America. It's like trying to understand why one plant is wilting. You can't just look at the leaves. You have to examine the soil it's planted in. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the soil is this. In 2023, only 31% of Black Americans were married. This is dramatically lower than the national average of 48%. The picture gets even starker when you look at another figure. A full 50% of African Americans have never been married at all, a staggering number compared to just 34% of all Americans. Sociologists have a name for this chasm, the marriage gap. And Black Americans are, statistically, the least married demographic group in the entire country. This is the world, the environment, in which the interracial marriage trend is happening. It means that the entire pool of potential, available, and willing marriage partners within the race is significantly smaller to begin with. Imagine the dating pool as a literal swimming pool. For the Black community, that pool is already smaller than others. So when a significant number of people decide to get out of that pool and swim in a different one, the effect on those who remain is felt much more intensely. The low overall marriage rate is a fundamental condition, the very soil in which all of these other complex factors take root and grow. One of the most powerful and perhaps least emotional explanations of this trend has less to do with feelings and more to do with cold, hard arithmetic. The marriage market. Let's demystify that term. Think of it exactly like a farmer's market at the end of the day. It's all about supply and demand. If a town has 100 bakers who need flour, but the market only has 50 sacks of flour to sell, those 50 sacks become incredibly valuable, and the bakers are in a tough spot. In the Black community, a series of powerful forces has created a market that is profoundly and structurally imbalanced. The first, and perhaps most discussed, imbalance is education. For decades, Black women have been consistently and spectacularly outpacing Black men in higher education. They are earning the clear majority of bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees awarded to Black students in America. This is an incredible story of achievement and resilience, but it creates an unintentional and deeply ironic mismatch in the dating pool. Across all cultures, studies consistently show that people tend to practice homogamy, the tendency to marry someone similar to themselves, especially in education and income. Women, in particular, have historically been more likely to marry up or marry an educational and economic peer. So, you have a rapidly growing population of highly educated, professionally successful Black women who are, quite naturally, looking for partners who are their peers. They are looking for someone who understands their journey, matches their ambition, and shares a similar socioeconomic standing. But the pool of Black men who meet that specific criteria simply isn't growing at the same rate. This creates what sociologists call a marriage squeeze. Imagine a game of musical chairs specifically for college-educated Black women. Every year, more and more brilliant players are added to the game, but the number of chairs reserved for their male educational peers isn't keeping pace. The competition becomes fierce, and many are left standing when the music stops. Now, let's flip the perspective. What does this dynamic mean for the Black men in this scenario? A 2017 Pew report uncovered a crucial link. For Black men, more education and a higher income often correlate with a higher chance of intermarriage. For Black men holding a bachelor's degree or higher, the intermarriage rate wasn't just 24%. It jumped to 30%. Why does this happen? The first reason is environmental. College, graduate school, and professional career paths often act as escalators, moving people out of familiar, racially homogenous communities and into more racially diverse spaces. A Black man who attends a predominantly white university and then enters a corporate field like tech, finance, or law will, by default, have a more racially diverse social and professional circle. His dating pool physically gets bigger and more varied. The available options are no longer just the women in his neighborhood or church. There are his colleagues, his classmates, the people he meets in professional organizations. Second, socioeconomic status is a powerful geographic sorter. Higher education leads to a higher income, which often means moving into more affluent and typically more racially integrated neighborhoods and cities. Once again, this fundamentally changes the local dating market. The people you meet at the local coffee shop, the gym, or the dog park are different. This isn't necessarily a conscious act of rejecting Black women. It's the natural, downstream consequence of a changed environment, an expanded map of possibilities. A third and far more tragic factor that skews the numbers is the devastating impact of mass incarceration and disproportionately high mortality rates on black men. These are not abstract social issues. They are forces that have systematically and brutally removed a huge number of men from the community. It's like a river that is constantly being diverted and dammed, preventing life-giving water from ever reaching the fields downstream. Every man who is incarcerated or dies young is a son, a brother, a father, and a potential husband who has been removed from the marriage market. This tragic deficit shrinks the pool of available black male partners even further, which in turn intensifies the marriage squeeze on black women to an almost unbearable degree. It creates a stark, painful reality where a college-educated, successful black woman might feel her options are critically limited, while a college-educated, successful black man, operating in a different social sphere, may feel his options are virtually limitless. All of these demographic pressures are unfolding against the backdrop of a society that has performed a complete, revolutionary 180-degree turn on the issue of interracial relationships. The legal, social, and cultural walls that once made these marriages taboo, dangerous, or even fatal have come tumbling down in a single lifetime. Any conversation about this topic must begin with a name: Loving versus Virginia. This wasn't just a court case. It was a seismic event. In 1967, the Supreme Court declared that laws banning interracial marriage were unconstitutional. But legal acceptance is only the first step. Social acceptance is a much longer, steeper climb. To understand how steep, consider this. In 1958, a Gallup poll asked Americans if they approved of marriages between black and white people. Only 4% said yes. 4%. That is a number so small it implies near total prohibition. It meant that for 96% of the country, this was an unacceptable, unthinkable union. Now, let's fast forward through the decades to today. The latest Gallup polls show that the approval rating for black-white marriage has soared to 94%. Let that sink in. From 4% to 94% in just over 60 years. This represents one of the most dramatic and rapid shifts in public opinion ever recorded in American history. It is the social equivalent of a mountain eroding into a flat, open plain. What was once forbidden and fiercely punished is now accepted by the overwhelming majority as a normal, unremarkable part of American life. This great acceptance has created a climate of personal freedom, a freedom of choice and love that simply did not exist for our parents and grandparents. This monumental shift is reflected and reinforced everywhere in our culture. Think about the media you consume. Interracial couples are ubiquitous in television shows, films, and advertisements. They are the friendly faces selling us cars, breakfast cereal, and life insurance. They are the romantic leads in our favorite sitcoms and dramas. This constant, casual, and pervasive representation normalizes these relationships on a subconscious level. It makes them feel completely familiar, a part of the everyday fabric of life. For younger generations, particularly millennials and Gen Z who grew up in this media environment, race is often seen as a much less primary or prohibitive factor in choosing a partner than it was for generations before. In this new environment, the criteria for a partner have begun to shift for many. The focus moves away from a checklist of shared backgrounds and toward a more personal, spiritual, and intellectual connection. The primary question is slowly changing from "do you share my race?" to "do you share my vision for life? Do you understand my humor? Do you match my ambition and drive? Do we vibe?" And let us never forget the historical gravity of this change. For generations in America, the relationship between a black man and a white woman was the ultimate taboo, a dynamic so feared and hated that it often ended in brutal, horrific violence and public lynchings. To have journeyed from that ghastly reality to a 94% social approval rating is nothing short of a revolution. This new reality has created an environment of unprecedented freedom, allowing personal connection and individual love to play a much larger, more decisive role than ever before in our history. We've delved into the hard data and charted the massive social changes that form the backdrop for this trend. But this isn't just a topic for sociologists. It's a deeply personal story that affects real people every single day. Your perspective, your experience, is a crucial part of this complex conversation. What are you seeing in your own community, in your own family, or on your own dating apps? What are the conversations you're having with your friends? I genuinely want to know. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this deep dive is giving you a clearer picture, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button, because we're about to wade into the most sensitive, most emotional, and most controversial part of this entire discussion. This is the point where we step away from the clean lines of data and enter the messy, emotional, and often painful world of personal preference, perception, and desire. This is a volatile territory of the online gender wars, the source of a million heated arguments, and the space where raw feelings of attraction, rejection, resentment, and longing come out into the open. To be honest and thorough, we have to be willing to explore these uncomfortable narratives, not as established facts, but as powerful, recurring arguments and perceptions that absolutely shape this trend. Let's begin with a narrative that is frequently voiced by some black men who choose to marry non-black women. The argument, often framed as a reluctant conclusion, is that their choice is a direct reaction to the perceived challenges of the black dating scene. This narrative frequently centers on contested ideas about femininity, attitude, and partnership. The claim, in its bluntest form, is that some black men feel that some black women have become too argumentative, independent, or masculine. In this view, they are seeking partners, often stereotypically, projected onto white, Asian, or Latina women, whom they perceive as more submissive, agreeable, or feminine. This is, of course, a loaded, stereotypical, and deeply problematic view, but to ignore its persistence in these conversations would be dishonest. A closely related theme in this narrative is the search for peace. You will hear men say that their relationships with non-black women feel easier or less fraught with conflict. They describe a dynamic where they feel more consistently appreciated, admired, and less criticized. In this framing, dating outside the race is presented as an escape, a deliberate move away from the stress, drama, and perceived emotional labor they associate with dating black women, and a move toward a relationship dynamic they find more tranquil and affirming. Then, we must address the deeply sensitive subject of social status. A more critical interpretation, one often voiced by black women and sociologists, posits that for some black men, marrying a white woman in particular functions as a status symbol. In a society that, despite all its progress, is still grappling with a deeply embedded racial hierarchy, a white partner can be seen as a sign that a black man has made it, that he has achieved the pinnacle of success and assimilation. It's viewed as the ultimate trophy in the game of upward mobility. This perspective argues that the choice is not purely about love or connection, but is at least partially motivated by the social capital and perceived validation that comes with having a white partner. Now, it is imperative that we turn to the other side of this emotional coin, the perspective of black women. For many, this entire trend is a source of profound, visceral pain and a pervasive feeling of abandonment. The sentiment, echoed in countless essays, conversations, and tearful confessions, is that the most eligible black men, the very men who are educated, successful, and financially stable, are disproportionately choosing a partner outside the race. This creates a powerful and painful feeling of being left behind by their own, of being deemed not good enough by the men who should be their most natural partners. This pain is often compounded by the frustration of battling negative stereotypes. Many black women feel they are unfairly characterized as difficult, angry, or aggressive, while women of other races are idealized and put on a pedestal. They feel held to an impossible, Eurocentric beauty standard that prizes lighter skin, straighter hair, and slender features, while seeing their own diverse beauty overlooked or devalued. Worst of all, they see their own strength, a quality forged and honed through centuries of adversity and resilience, a quality that helped carry the black community on its back, reframed as a negative, a masculine trait that makes them undesirable as partners. For these women, the narrative of personal preference doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like a collective, targeted rejection. Finally, we arrive at the simplest and yet most complex argument of all. It's just personal preference. This is a viewpoint that love is, or should be, colorblind. It argues that people connect with who they connect with, soul to soul, and that race is an irrelevant factor in a genuine bond. From this angle, to even question these choices, to subject them to this level of scrutiny, is a form of prejudice itself. A black man, This argument goes, should have the absolute freedom to love and marry anyone he chooses without being labeled a sellout, a traitor, or a social climber. All of these tangled perspectives, woven together with threads of truth, harmful stereotypes, historical context, and deep personal pain, are essential parts of the story. None of them is the whole story, but the whole story cannot be understood without them. Beyond the big drivers of demographics and cultural shifts, a few powerful X factors add more layers and complexity to this trend. These aren't the root causes, but they act like gasoline on a fire, accelerating the entire process. They are the practical, real-world mechanics that shape who we meet, who we date, and who we ultimately marry. First, let's revisit income. We already established that for Black men, more education correlates with a higher rate of intermarriage. The exact same pattern holds true for income. As a Black man's income increases, so does his likelihood of marrying a non-Black woman. This isn't because money itself changes his desires, but because the path to a higher income often leads through the very environments where intermarriage becomes more likely. The high-paying jobs in tech, finance, law, and medicine are often in diverse corporate settings, located in diverse major cities. Financial success, educational attainment, and a more diverse dating pool are often not separate factors, but three parts of the same life trajectory. Next, and perhaps most underrated, is geography. Where you live matters immensely. It is one of the single greatest predictors of your romantic life. The rates of intermarriage are vastly higher in large, diverse, multicultural metropolitan areas, especially on the West Coast and in the Northeast, compared to more homogeneous rural areas or even many parts of the South. Think about it. The dating experience in New York City, Los Angeles, or Seattle is a completely different universe from the dating experience in a small southern town or Midwestern suburb. A Black man living in a major metro area is not just playing a different dating game. He's playing an entirely different sport on a different field, with a global roster of players. His environment presents him with a different set of romantic possibilities every single day. And then we have the biggest game changer of the 21st century, online dating. Dating apps and websites have completely blown the doors off the traditional limitations of your social circle. Before, your dating pool was limited to your school, your workplace, your neighborhood, your church, and friends of friends. Now it's virtually infinite. Research conducted on online dating platforms has shown that Black men are often more open to messaging and dating across racial lines online than many other groups. While the data also shows that most people's behavior still defaults to same-race preferences in the end, the sheer scale and volume of these apps provide a massive, unprecedented platform for interracial connections to spark. For a Black man who is open to it, these apps are a direct, unfiltered pipeline to a local, national, and even global pool of women, fundamentally altering the mathematics of meeting a partner. These X factors, income, geography, and technology, are not the primary causes. They are, however, powerful accelerators. They create the real-world infrastructure and opportunities for the larger demographic, social, and psychological forces to play out in individual lives. After all the statistics, the sociological theories, and the cultural analysis, this trend boils down to millions of individual human beings making the most personal choices of their lives. There can be no single real reason because there is no single monolithic Black man. There is no one story. There are millions. To truly understand the human dimension of this, let's move beyond the abstract and imagine two distinct, detailed stories. First, let's consider a man we'll call David. David grew up in a predominantly Black, working-class neighborhood in the Midwest. He was a brilliant student, the kid who always had his head in a book. His grades earned him a full academic scholarship to a major university on the West Coast. For the first time in his life, he was a racial minority. The experience was jarring at first, but then it became liberating. He made friends from all over the world, from South Korea, from rural Oregon, from the suburbs of Boston. His worldview expanded exponentially. After graduating with an engineering degree, he landed a coveted job at a major tech firm in a bustling, hyperdiverse city. His co-workers are a microcosm of the United Nations. He lives in a trendy, integrated neighborhood where his neighbors are artists, programmers, and entrepreneurs of every possible background. He gets into rock climbing and joins a local group. It's there that he meets a woman who happens to be a second-generation Asian American. They bond instantly, not over their racial backgrounds, but over their shared, nerdy love for science fiction, their mutual ambition, and a deep desire to travel the world. For David, his choice of partner feels like the most natural thing in the world. It's the organic outcome of the specific life path he has forged. His marriage is not a rejection of black women. It's a profound acceptance of the individual woman he fell in love with in the world he now inhabits. Now, let's consider a woman we'll call Tasha. Tasha grew up in a neighborhood not far from David's, and she also excelled in school. Her path, however, led her to an HBCU, a historically black college and university, where she was surrounded by black excellence and felt deeply affirmed in her identity. She thrived, went on to a top-tier law school, and is now a highly successful corporate attorney in a major southern city. She is the epitome of the educated, successful black woman the statistics describe. She wants a partner who is her equal, someone who is ambitious, intelligent, and who understands the nuances of her journey as a black woman in America. But when she logs onto dating apps or considers the single men in her social circles, she feels a deep and gnawing frustration. It seems like the very men she would consider her peers, men with life stories similar to David's, are not looking for partners within her community. She sees them on social media, their wedding photos and baby announcements with non-black partners, and feels a complex cocktail of emotions: frustration, disappointment, and a sharp, undeniable sense of loss. Her lived experience is one of watching her viable options shrink in real time, and a painful feeling of being consistently overlooked and undervalued by the men she feels most connected to by culture and history. Both of these experiences, David's and Tasha's, are completely real and entirely valid. They are two sides of the exact same coin. David's story is one of expanding options, individualism, and the freedom of choice in a new, integrated world. Tasha's story is one of contracting options, collective pain, and the feeling of being left behind by that same changing world. And in the middle of it all, we have to acknowledge the interracial couples themselves. Their journey is often not a simple, happily ever after. They frequently face their own unique set of challenges, from navigating subtle disapproval from both sides of the family, to bridging significant cultural differences in communication styles, food, and traditions. They must constantly answer the question, "What are you?" when directed at their children. Their love stories are often quiet stories of incredible resilience, endless communication, and the hard work of building a unique family culture from scratch, a culture that consciously and deliberately honors every part of their heritage. The real reason, then, is not a single point, but a sprawling, intricate mosaic. It's part demographic math, part revolutionary social progress, part deeply personal preference, part unresolved historical pain, and part millions of individual love stories, each with its own unique plot. We started this journey with a single incendiary statistic, 1 in 4. But as we've peeled back the layers, it's clear that the truth is infinitely more complicated and profoundly more human. There is no one simple, real reason. Instead, what we have is a perfect storm of converging forces. First, the undeniable demographic realities of a shifting marriage market, educational achievement gaps, and the tragic absence of so many black men have created a fundamental, structural imbalance. Second, a revolution in social and cultural acceptance has torn down the historical barriers, creating an unprecedented freedom for individuals to choose partners based on connection rather than convention. And third, the deeply personal, emotionally charged, and often controversial world of preference, attraction, and perception acts as the powerful engine driving millions of individual decisions within this new landscape. This isn't a simple story of progress, nor is it a simple story of betrayal. It is a story of profound, rapid, and irreversible change. It shows no signs of slowing down, and its effects will be felt for generations to come. This forces us to realize that the most important question for community may no longer be just, why is this happening? But rather, now what? How do we navigate this new reality? We spent our time today exploring the causes of this trend. We've looked at the data, the history, and the personal motivations, but we haven't yet touched on the consequences. What is the lived experience for the children born of these unions? In a world still obsessed with race and identity, How do they navigate a society that constantly wants to put them in a box? A society that may not fully accept them as belonging to either world? What does this mean for the future of Black culture, Black identity, and the very definition of the Black family in the 21st century? That is the next, and perhaps even more crucial, chapter of the story, and it's the one we'll tackle. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications bell on so you don't miss it. Thank you for watching.